Good evening. Thank you for attending or for watching, and I hope this foreshadows the attendance for the next 4 years. It's appreciated. Thank you. So I need a mover and a seconder to call the meeting to order, please. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Chapman, that the regular meeting of Council of the Township of Springwater of January 9th, 2019 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And I'll sign them all later. Now, will you please stand for the singing of the national anthem, led by Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our songs command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Council, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, if any arise, please inform us at the time. Thank you. I now call upon Mr. Craig Davidson and the students of Elmvale District High School to present to Council for up to 10 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. May I introduce to you Caden Ritchie. Well, actually, they're going to do their own introductions, so let's do that. We are missing one. She went to the Ed Center, so she's just on her way over. Her name is Lily, so we'll just have Lily come up this way. So welcome up. Come on up, Lily. Okay. So I'm going to be turning over the delegation to my students. At one point, I will come in, and I'll just remind the students that when you're speaking, to speak into the microphones, because that's the way they're able to communicate to the public there. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Avery White. I'm a grade 10 at Elmvale. I'm going on the exchange because I really want to be immersed in the cultures that Canada has for us.
Hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm grade 10 at EDHS also, and I want to go on this exchange because I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it'd be a fun experience.
Hi, my name's Lily Brown. I'm a grade 10 at Elmvale also, and I can't wait to go on this exchange because I really want to learn about the art they do there and their culture.
Hi, I'm Caden Ritchie, and I wanted to go to the exchange program to try something different because this would be my first one. And also I want to go there to try the wild game.
So this is a cultural exchange where we will be learning about the natives.
Yeah.
So we're in a very tightly knit community, a very small community where we don't get to experience much of anything else except for where we're from. So going on this exchange will help us find more experience and learn way more than from a textbook or even from our teachers. Actually being there will help us learn way more about what they've been through, and
Getting to know our fellow students is really important because instead of going on the exchange with 15 strangers, we're going with 15 friends. So with our fundraising, we're making sure that we're getting to know everyone, making sure that we all become really close so that when we go on the exchange, it'll be like going with a whole bunch of friends and not a whole bunch of strangers.
So we're going to be seeing many new places. I'm pretty sure a lot of the kids on this exchange have not even been on a plane before, so that will be a great experience for them. We'll be able to see landscapes that we haven't seen before and way more things that we don't see here.
Trying new foods or popular foods in Saskatchewan. When we go to Saskatchewan, there will be different types of foods we could try. So like deer sausages, there's Saskatchewan pie, berry pie, and others that we could find.
So first, they're coming to Saskatchewan. I mean, they're coming here, and then we are going to Saskatchewan. So when they come here, we are going to the Niagara Falls, we're going to a Blue Jays game, we're going to Algonquin Park for the day. We're doing a whole bunch of activities so that they get the full experience of what it's like to live in Ontario. And when we go there, they're doing the same for us.
So it's Greg Davidson
Can
speaking.
you just hold 1 minute? We're having a bit of a technical difficulty here. 1 second, please. Okay, go ahead, thanks.
Again, it's Greg Davidson, teacher at Elmvale District High School. I'm very proud to say that this will be our 4th exchange in 4 years. There's upwards of 50 students have been involved in the exchange, and the program philosophy is to make it very accessible for students. So as you, or some of you may know, the flights are covered by Experiences Canada, an agency of Heritage Canada. So there is no transportation costs involved for the students. Ostensibly, if the students were to, when we arrive in James Smith First Nation, they should expect no expenses there, as they take care of us through all their cultural events. What we do is we raise money in our community to host our guests. Okay, so the activities they talked about, anything from going from, Lalonde's Maple Sugar Bush to Family Farm to some of the more larger Ontario destinations. We want to make sure that's accessible for our students to offer those types of programs. Generally speaking, our budget is depending on the year, is between $15,000 and $18,000, and a lot of all of that has been fundraised, or to the extent that families are pay between $200 to $300 in hosting activities. But if you consider that for the whole program, I think it makes it very accessible for the experience that the students get. And there is cases from time to time where we have parents who come to us and say that we just can't even do that. And so we make extra arrangements for the students to be involved a little more heavily in the fundraising activities that we have. So that's the philosophy, is to make it accessible for students and to remove those financial barriers. Thank you.
So about a month ago, we went to Richie's Feeds and Needs in Elmvale, and we made 30 wreaths, and we sold them for $35 a piece and made $1,000. It was fun. We had a great team building activity, and it was a lot of money for fundraising.
So some of the fundraisers that we're doing is we're doing pizza kits with Little Caesars. We're doing a polar plunge, so we're getting donations for that, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're taking donations from local businesses, and we're really working as hard as we can to make this trip as affordable as possible and as fun as possible. So what we're asking from you is $1,000 from your Springwater swing to go towards our trip, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. When and where is the polar dip?
That's a good question.
Winter Rama, so it's Penetang Winter Rama Polar Plunge.
I see. Good. All right, thank you for the presentation. Councillors, any questions? Yes, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll volunteer the mayor to attend the polar dip.
I'd be glad to attend it as long as you come and participate in it.
There you go. In Midhurst, I've already heard about all the hard work you folks are doing up there, so I have no problem in supporting your efforts, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor French, to Renee, or to, sorry, Clerk Chaperone, is it at this point that we could pull forward a resolution to support them so they know tonight?
Clerk Chaperone.
Yes, thank you. So first, council would have to table the motion to receive the delegation, and then somebody would propose an amendment to provide the funding.
Can I propose an amendment? Do I have to table it first?
I need a mover and seconder to receive the delegation for this trip to Melfort, Saskatchewan. Can I have a mover? Councillor Moore and Councillor Chapman, thank you. That the delegation from the Elmvale District High School be received. All those in favor?
No.
Oh,
I'd like to propose an amendment.
yes.
And to have a friendly amendment, say, and include a $1,000 support from the Springwater Swing.
You need a seconder for that? Councillor Cabral, thank you. That the council hereby approve a donation in the amount of $1,000 to the Elmvale District High School for their student exchange will be added to the previous motion now before council that is being amended as such. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's still one more vote. It's a lot of voting.
Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Chapman, that the delegation from Elmvale District High School be received, and that council hereby approve a donation in the amount of $1,000 to the Elmvale District High School for their student exchange program. Any questions or discussions? I would just like to make the point, and you didn't offer it, but you have before, and I assume that you're going to be coming back to us with a presentation regarding the trip afterward?
Absolutely.
Good.
Would you like that with the Melfort students?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that would be good. And
If it coordinates with their time here in Ontario and a council meeting, that would be most convenient.
That'd be great.
Well, we will, at council here, try to be as entertaining as the polar bear dip. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thanks again. Have a good trip.
Now you're.
Thank you.
Okay, I now call upon Mr. John Weller of the Barrie North Tennis Club to present to council for up to 10 minutes. Just say that we'll be pulling forward the related action item to this matter, 10.3, regarding this to review after question period. Thank you, Mr. Weller.
Sorry, I just want to see how to advance the slide here. Go that way. Ah. There, okay. Good evening, Mayor Allen, Deputy Mayor Coughlin, and members of council. My name's John Weller. I'm co-owner of Barrie North Winter Tennis. This is some information on the club. Originally, the club was built in 1998 as Doran Park Winter Tennis. I moved to Midhurst in 2001 and saw it there, and we decided to make a purchase offer on it, and have owned it since 2003. It's located at 41 Spence Avenue. The club is open. The dome is erected early October each year and comes down the end of April. We have memberships, weekly events, group lessons, private lessons, that sort of thing. While BNWT gains from the ability to run a business on township property, Springwater and the local community sees benefits as well. The club, the courts are covered by the dome that protects the asphalt surface. Just a couple of years ago, the courts were painted for the first time in over 15 years. Ordinarily, exposing them to the elements creates heaving, cracking, paint loss, that sort of thing. The club obviously offers opportunities for local employment and offers opportunities for physical activity for the constituents of Springwater. BNWT continues to maintain a good tenant relationship with the Springwater, Township of Springwater. We've paid hydro bills on time every year for usage from October to April. We also pay the water bills actually for all 12 months. We pay them right through the summertime. In 2015, as I said, after 17 years, the tennis courts required resurfacing. The township paid for the resurfacing, but in lieu of that, the club, ourselves, we contributed 60% toward the paving of the parking lot. So you can see that previous picture there. There's the old parking lot with a tree in the middle, and that one with the paved parking lot. The club's mission is to provide the highest quality programming and coaching for our valued members and guests in a first-class facility that allows for the game of tennis to be enjoyed throughout the winter months. We have rebranded. My partner is Terry Redvers. He's my uncle. Terry owned, prior to our club, he owned Blackmore Tennis Club, which is 6 courts in Richmond Hill and 3 courts in Newmarket, the Newmarket Winter Tennis Club. He's had Newmarket for, I'm going to say 40 years, Blackmore for over 30 years. We have since built Maryland Redvers Tennis Club. We manage Thornhill, and just this year opened Milton Tennis Club, and have rebranded ourselves collectively as Tennis Clubs of Canada. If any of you are golfers in the room, it's sort of a club link-like philosophy where you're sort of a member at, you know, you have privileges at the other clubs, if you will. Our growth, membership numbers have gradually increased in each of the last 15 years. We started with about 160 members in 2003. I can tell you that the first 8 to 10 years were extremely lean. The club did not make money. We are now at a point where we're about 350 members, and the club is finally doing very, very well. We offer private and group lessons, programs for the general public. And that Skyhawks logo there, junior lessons have surpassed expectations. The Skyhawks is something that we created. It's kind of like the Barrie Colts type of thing. It gives some branding to our junior teams. We created a junior tennis team program as opposed to making an individual sport. And in fact, Tennis Canada has recognized us as probably one of the leaders in doing so. So, you know, so we're really proud of that. Upgrading the facility, the old dome, the previous dome, was actually still usable. However, when Terry and I visited it, you know, well, I'm there frequently, but when we went into the bubble a couple of years ago, we found that it was very, very dark, dingy. The bubble was dirty. You can expect that, you know, it gets put up and taken down every year and scratched along the, you know, the surface. So we actually put in a brand new bubble with hanging LED lights and insulation. This is the dome here, and you can see that little bottom, you know, circle. That's the clubhouse. It was hidden in the trees up until about a year or so ago, and then when Township decided to put in that skating rink, they ripped down all the trees, and now you can see, you know, our good old ugly little portable. But we've outgrown that facility, and we believe that a new clubhouse would be a welcome addition to the Doran Park complex and to the community of Midhurst. This gives you an idea of the interior of the facility and the tight fit that it is. This is Monday night transition. If you got 16 people going onto the court and you have 16 people coming off the court, and, you know, with mums and dads and whatnot, it can be a little bit tight in there for, you know, for the few minutes while people are collecting their gear. a possible partnership with Bonneville Homes. This is an idea of what we thought that the clubhouse might look at, or look like rather. It would have, you know, larger members lounge. The current clubhouse is roughly about 800 odd square feet. It's basically a 40 by 24 trailer. The one that we're looking at would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 square feet, you know, on the main floor. Larger change rooms, public access restrooms, which we can, you know, discuss, potential exercise room, possible liquor license. I just put a question mark around that, just throwing that out there. And then obviously a pro shop. This is where it sits, and that would be the footprint that it would be based on. We would extend forward probably about 15 feet, another 5 feet in the back. You know, we'd be looking at 65 by 30 feet. You know, basically the purple up in the top is where we could put an outdoor washroom facility for the skating rink. Simply advantages for Doran Park is the aesthetic appeal, and it could be used certainly by the, you know, the summer club in the summertime. We have no opposition to that. We'd love that. And the township could have additional meeting space as well. And that's basically, you know, the idea. Again, to summarize, we're looking for permission to pursue the idea of, you know, of putting a new building. But aside from that, we're looking for funding ideas, you know, and we'd appreciate anybody's suggestions in that regard.
Okay, thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive this delegation? Councillor Hanna and Councillor Chapman. Anybody have any questions before we review this as part of the action item 10.3 after question period? Yes, Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask Mr. Weller a couple of questions, if I may. Firstly, sir, if this goes forward, would the people who are not members of the North Barrie Tennis Club in the summertime, would they have access and be allowed to use this building
In the summertime,
in the summertime?
certainly, yes.
Second question, I don't believe the current facility is accessible. Would the new structure, if it goes forward, meet the accessibility requirements that are in place now or coming forward in the province?
And that's likely true too, yes. And that's a good question. We've talked about that. My daughter's actually been pursuing, you know, grants for, you know, for accessibility. The clubhouse itself, we would like to make accessible. Currently the one that we have is a very steep. We've got, you know, 3 upward steps, but we would, you know, certainly pursue an accessible, you know, an accessible building for sure. As far as the dome itself, we'd have to, I mean, we can get people in there. It just means opening up the pressurized door to the parking lot and bringing, you know, somebody in a wheelchair in that way. Mm-hmm. So it can be done. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll have further discussion on this when we review the action item. So the motion that the delegation from the Barrie North Tennis Club be received, can we vote on that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you, and stay tuned. We'll be returning to it shortly. Thank you. Next, we have question period where members of the public are invited to ask questions of council or make comments regarding an agenda item this evening. Each person may speak for a maximum of 2 minutes, and the question period will not exceed a total of 10 minutes, and time will be monitored by Clerk Chaperon. So does anybody have any questions? If so, come forward. Please have a seat, pull the mics together, and state your name and address before posing the question. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Last night I attended an information session. I forgot. My name's Mary Lynn Atkinson and I live at 49 Willow Landing. I attended an information session at the Midhurst United Church regarding Bill 66. It's part of the omnibus bill that's had first reading. and will be going forward. My concerns about Bill 66, it's part of the PC government's Open for Business, and the impact on legislative changes to environmentally protected lands. So, for example, I'm sure you've heard about the controversy about opening up the Greenbelt and Lake Simcoe to developers. So part of that is that there's no requirement that local municipalities and councils have consultation when they put forward those amendments, unless the local municipality council chooses to do so. So my question to council is, will this council put forward a motion to hold public consultations and information sessions on resolutions that impact on environmentally sensitive lands in the Springwater District?
Okay, well, I thank you for the question. We had some councillors in attendance at that meeting last night, and I'm sure some people here are attending because of that. We have spent a lot of time studying Bill 66, what's available so far. The regulations aren't out. And if you see agenda item 7.1, it's part of the correspondence. And at that time, I'm sure that item will be pulled, and Director Spagnell is going to be making some comments at that. So we'll talk about that further then, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Come forward, please. Name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Hale Mahan. I reside at 33 Hillview Crescent. Tonight, I'd like to address an item on the agenda. That would be item 9.1, which is private retail cannabis. So the province will divide $15 million between the municipalities that opt into hosting cannabis retail outlets within their boundaries. And even if Springwater decides to opt out, people who wish to purchase cannabis will still be able to access it, either from online or from neighboring municipalities. And this will cause an increase in costs in policing and other cannabis-related expenses. But if we opt out, we would not receive any of the provincial funding to cover these costs. It would be very unfortunate to receive the problems associated with cannabis retail, but not receive any of the benefits. So I'd like to encourage council, if I may, to think about this when they're voting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments, and that too will be covered in 9.1 in this evening's agenda, and we appreciate your comments and questions, and we will be addressing them at that point. Thanks. Anybody else wish to come forward with a question?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Sandy Agnew. I live at 1305 Scarlet Line in Oromadonte, and I'm the chair of the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. And the first speaker addressed some of our concerns, but I gather you're going to pull that item and discuss that this evening. Is that correct?
I think there is a good chance of that. Thank you. Yes.
Will you be voting on anything on the motion? We forward a draft motion to council. Is it likely you're going to vote on it tonight, or if not, when would you be voting on it?
There's a correspondence item, as you know. You've seen the agenda, I'm sure, and so it will be discussed. It won't be voted on tonight. If there could be a motion put forward by a councillor, but that would not be voted on tonight. If it was put forward, it would come back to council in the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you for those questions. So we'll move on to previous, we're going forward to item 10.3, which is returning to the Barrie North Winter Tennis Clubhouse. And may I have a mover and seconder for this related motion? Councillor Hanna and Councillor Moore. Read the motion now. that the report from the Director of Recreation, Parks and Properties regarding the Barrie North Winter Tennis Clubhouse dated January 9, 2019 be received, and that Barrie North Winter Tennis be authorized to pursue construction of a new and larger clubhouse at Doran Park, and that the lease agreement with Barrie North Winter Tennis be amended to reflect the end-of-term value of the clubhouse, and that construction of washrooms, change rooms, and storage rooms to serve the Midhurst Pavilion be considered in the 2019 capital budget deliberations. Questions and discussion by council on this matter? Councillor Hanna?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure Mr. Belcourt can add to this, but I have been advised, because there's a certain portion of the expense for the clubhouse that would be part of the township's cost to build the washrooms that would service the new pavilion, that if necessary, I've been advised that the Midhurst Hall, Recreational Hall Board would consider fundraising for a portion to help offset the costs, and would also ask that the Barrie Tennis Club, or I'm sorry, the Midhurst Tennis Club be asked to consider doing the same, and hopefully that would help council agree to going forward with this project.
Director Belcourt, can you fill us in a bit more on this and some of the other matters related to this?
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship. Through the council. When Barrie North Winter Tennis approached us regarding replacing the current trailer, which has outlived its life, with a new larger facility, I took the opportunity to ask if there was the potential for us to potentially partner with them and add a section on to what they're proposing in order to serve the Midhurst Pavilion. It seemed like construction of one facility, and I was looking at, I've proposed in the budget for this year is a 500 square foot building, similar in size to the current washroom facility at Doran Park that serves the Ball Diamonds, to be added on to whatever their proposal is, in order that we could take advantage of utilizing the same contractors, utilizing the same HVAC systems, plumbing systems, etc., and as versed to building separately again. At this time, they are looking for assurances that council would support them replacing the current trailer with a new building. One of the issues we do need to resolve is, as noted in the report, is the current agreement has an end-of-term value for the clubhouse and the dome of $1. With them making a considerable investment of several hundred thousands of dollars in the new clubhouse, they're wanting to renegotiate the end-of-term value, and rightly so. There's quite a difference between what they're proposing and a 20-year-old trailer that sits on the site now that's worth nothing. So that is one of the main components that we do need to work out if we were to proceed or allow them to proceed with the construction of a new clubhouse.
Thank you. And just for clarification, so this clubhouse would be open 12 months of the year to service both winter and summer tennis, and if we were to partner and build onto this, it would include washrooms plus a change facility, heated presumably, with access to the rest of the clubhouse for 12 months of the year, depending on what was occurring at the pavilion. Is that the correct assumption?
Thank you, Your Worship. That would be incorrect. Our access would be provided strictly to our washrooms and change rooms and not to the clubhouse. They have suggested that they could potentially work in partnership with the Midhurst Tennis Club to allow them to use the facility for their functions in the summer. As you may have noticed over the years, their membership has grown considerably too, to the point where they're pretty much using the facility 7 days a week, almost 10 hours a day. So there is an added need to serve their membership. And Barrie North Winter Tennis is willing to enter into a partnership for them to use the other part of the facility. What we would be looking at for our purposes would be providing washrooms, a change room, and storage area for the Midhurst Pavilion users, which they would access separately from the exterior of the building.
And that would be open for 12 months of the year for different activities at the pavilion?
That's correct.
Other questions, discussion? So the lease agreement would have to be renegotiated, and the handling of the portion related to the change rooms and washrooms would have to be negotiated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what would happen with respect to maintenance, insurance, liability coverage through insurance, those sorts of things?
With regards to maintenance, we would be responsible for maintenance of our own areas, and proportionate share of cost. For example, if the furnace needed to be replaced, etc., that would have to be negotiated as well, as you've stated. Insurance, but we would have to investigate how the insurance would work, whether our insurance would provide the overall insurance, or if theirs does and they have to purchase insurance from us. That would have to be investigated as well.
And just further to that, the 125,000, how did that number arise, and how does that relate to the work that was done on the Phelpston change room, which I presume would be somewhat similar facility, although Phelpston was the refurbishment of an old building. This is the building of a new building, but can you give us some background on the makeup of the 125,000?
Yes, thank you, Worship. The makeup of the 125,000 is a 500 square foot facility, and then we went through the various components, the substructure, the slab, decorative block, interior block, finishings, fittings, mechanical, electrical, utilizing the Hanscom costing guide for this area, which brought us out to a value of about $230 a square foot. So with a construction cost of approximately $115,000 and change plus the taxes, with a bit of a contingency, so it's where we come up with $125,000. With regards to the Phelpston washroom building, it was simply removing a block wall, relocating it, and installing doors and interior fixtures. There was no structural work required to that facility outside the building, so it was simply an inside renovation that was undertaken with our own forces.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Coghlan?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor French. So, Alan, he did it first.
Just start charging $10 a time.
Sorry. Through you, I believe this would be Director Belcourt again. So it was said tonight that the clubhouse portion of this build would be available to residents as meeting space. I'm just clarification on that. And then the other portion, elaborating on Councillor Hanna's comment about accessibility, if or when this becomes the property of the municipality, if it's not built to accessible code today, I would hate to see a future council have to pay a lot of money to bring something up to code then. So I'm just curious of how that would impact us.
Thank you to Deputy Mayor Coghlan. With regards to the use of the public for meeting space, and that would be another item that would have to be negotiated with Barrie North Winter Tennis and how the logistics of that would work. With regards to accessibility, I fully expect that they would have to meet the current accessibility guidelines in order to construct the facility.
Yes. Further?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So then, essentially tonight, we're putting a placeholder in the budget, and there will be a subsequent report that comes forward to council outlining all these details and what the agreement looks like, and what the building looks like, and how it can be utilized by community members with the service club.
If that were the case, the current motion would have to be amended.
So I have no problem putting the placeholder in there so that when this information does come forward, it's there and we're ready to go. But I think that there's a lot of information that this council doesn't have at this point.
Okay, before considering that, I just wanted to follow up. Councillor Hannah, so you were, if I heard you correctly, you were referring to the possibility of this being a 50-50 money raising, were you, or did I misinterpret that?
I'm sorry, I don't, excuse me, Mayor, I don't know the percentage that the Hall Board would be expected to fundraise for. But the Midhurst Community Hall would be willing to fundraise to help make this building occur, and would also ask that the Midhurst Tennis Club be asked to do the same, so it would offset the costs to taxpayers to build the washrooms and so on, that we're going to have to build in the future. And I think Mr. Belcourt could confirm that if we don't build it now in a partnership, and we have to build it in the future, it's going to cost a lot more, because we would have to build a separate septic system and so on. And I think this is a great opportunity for the taxpayers of Springwater to get a facility at a fraction of the cost that would be in the future.
Thank you. CEO Brindley, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If council's concerns are to get additional information and that the current recommendation that staff has isn't quite where council wishes to go, council does have the option to refer the report back to staff, and staff could find out answers to these outstanding questions and get back to council as soon as possible with additional information.
Thank you. Yes, I believe we're certainly all supportive of this, but some extra information arising from these questions about the lease, the details of the cost, the possible funding of it would be helpful in a subsequent report. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. Could I ask that when that report comes forward, there be a suggestion on the portion that the community be asked to fundraise for, so that would help us at budget time?
Thank you. All right, we're just crafting the amendment to factor these things in. 1 second. Okay, can I I have a mover and a seconder then for this referral? Councillor, Deputy Mayor Coghlan? Councillor Chapman? That the motion now before council be referred to staff for further information. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we're moving on to minutes. May I have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the minutes? Deputy Mayor Coghlan, Councillor Cabral. That the minutes of the council listed herein be approved as presented. Any questions or discussions on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we move on to item 7, which is correspondence and information items. And yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So previously I've been advised that item 3 and item 8 have been pulled for separate consideration.
Okay, so are there any other of these items that council wishes to have pulled before we review the remainder? Deputy Mayor Coghlan?
Thank you. Just for clarification, you said 3 and 8? Yes. I believe that there's members in the audience this evening that would like to hear from this council and staff on item 7 as well.
Yeah. Pull 7. Any others? 3, 7, and 8. All right, we need a mover and a seconder to deal with the rest of the correspondence and information items. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Moore and Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the correspondence and information items listed as follows be received as information. And that is the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority Board Meeting Highlights of December 14, 2018. That the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit retaking action on food insecurity roles for municipalities. That the Elmvale and District Food Bank re-challenges of the current food bank location. That the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit read the Public Health Municipality Guidance for implementation of legalization of cannabis. The Ministry of Finance read the 2019 Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario read the financial risk for property taxpayers and municipal budgets. The Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition read Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act. And finally, the Elmvale District Lions Club re the bus shelter in Elmvale, with the exception of items 3, 7, and 8 to be dealt with separately. Any questions or discussions before we take the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving to item number 3, the Elmvale and District Food Bank. Read the challenges of the current food bank location. There was a letter and received from the food bank, and there was a meeting held with the food bank to review what the current challenge is with respect to the current location. And there are a couple of options. Director Spagno, maybe you could provide an overview with respect to what the options are before we take a vote on that. Sorry, I meant Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Worship. He may come into play. As you reported, we did have a meeting with members of the Elmvale District Food Bank, and they physically showed us the constraints of the current building and the method of how they have to deal with incoming food, outgoing food, etc. So two options are they had suggested two options. One to be the installation of a dumbwaiter in the Elmvale Community Hall in order to be able to move food from the lower level to the second level without having to physically carry it up the large number of stairs in that facility. The second option would be to construct a new facility on municipal land on Yonge Street. The area would be located in front of the existing water towers for Elmvale. Approximately a 2,500 to 3,000 square foot facility could be located on this site and would provide them with ample room for their current operations and room to expand in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or discussions by councillors with respect to this? Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
I'm sorry.
Mayor Allen, I have a resolution here. I was going to moved by me, second by George Cabral, that I would go ahead and read, or unless Deputy Mayor Coughlin wants to speak first.
No, go ahead, Councillor.
Okay. The correspondence and information item 3 regarding the Elmvale and District Food Bank regarding the challenges of current food bank location be received as information, and that the request be referred to staff to discuss possible options with the Elmvale and District Food Bank, including potential partnership opportunities, and that staff report back to council with all potential solutions.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions with respect to that proposed motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll look forward to that report. Next, we'll go to item 7, which is the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition Rebill 66. I need a mover and a seconder for this, please, before we discuss it. Councillor Moore and Councillor Chapman. That the correspondence and information item number 7, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition Rebill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act be received as information. Any,
I have a procedural question.
yes.
Thank
Deputy
you,
Mayor Coughlin.
Mayor French, through you to Renee, or sorry, Clerk Chaperone. Is it possible to have the conversation before it's tabled? Because if I would like to present an amendment to that that involves a staff report or something, would I have to just bring it forward another staff? Thank you.
Thank you. So now that this is on the table to receive as information, a member of council may propose an amendment should they wish to receive further information or whatnot. It would be an amendment to the main motion. It would be voted on, and whether it proceeds or not, the main motion would come back.
So at this point, the discussion is now with staff. If that's okay, thank you.
Okay, so CAO Brindley, I believe that you had, no, sorry, Director Spagnell, you were going to present to us with respect to this.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I guess first, just a little overview. Bill 66 was released in December 2018. What Bill 66 represents is extensive changes and revisions to legislature that ranges from a broad base of different acts. Those acts range from the repeal of the Pawnbrokers Act, just naming a few here, amendment to Child Care and Early Years Act 2015 and the Education Act, all the way down to the item of discussion here, which is the Planning Act and which is the Open for Business bylaw, which has been presented to the legislature for first reading. Generally speaking, based on the limited information that's been provided, it appears that the provincial government is looking to bring forward a little bit of flexibility by providing municipalities with additional powers to pass an open for business bylaw. The intent behind this bylaw is to allow for an expedited process to bring in development that would create jobs. Now, as far as the mandate goes of the bylaw, it is something that is very heavily referred to in planning policy to have jobs, equivalent jobs and jobs available for populations to avoid commuting traffic and the impacts of the environment as a result of the commuter traffic that occurs. Based on what has been provided to date, staff is not in a position to provide comment for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the extent of the changes in that the limited time periods that have been provided by the province to provide comment is not enough time for staff to provide for any meaningful comment. The other issue is the fact that the regulations related to the Open for Business bylaw have not been provided for review either. So at this point in time, staff isn't sure even what the powers are that will be given to local councils to determine whether or not it's appropriate to utilize this very powerful tool. So at this point in time, from staff's position, we're not prepared to comment by the January 20th commenting period, just for those reasons as I stated below. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council has. Specific to the item that's up for consideration right now, I think on the basis that staff hasn't prepared comment and that we have limited information, it would be my opinion that it'd be premature to provide anything on the basis of the item that's on the agenda today. And I'll just leave it at that, but I'm available for any questions that council may have.
CAO Brindley?
Yeah, further to the comments by Director Spagnell, my concern is without the level of detail that we need to make a decision, it's difficult for us to make a decision. This is a tool, I'll back up. Our council is concerned about the environment too. Our council is concerned about not abusing power not affecting our water courses or our sensitive properties. That's something our council's very concerned about, and they've ran on that. But at the same time, there may be instances within Springwater where such a bylaw might be advantageous, where it doesn't affect those things. But we don't have the details yet to make those decisions. And at the same time, the motion proposed in this correspondence, I feel is premature until we know those rules. And then at that time, council can look at that resolution in context with the regs that come from the province, and then make a decision on that time and how they manage this new policy. I don't see it going against what's proposed today. I just see that we need some more time to see what the actual ink is on paper. And then council can, it's our policy, it's our bylaw at the end of the day. So it's up to our council to determine how we use that tool. And in the future, if our council wants to add a little more to that bylaw, whether it's consultation or whether put more belts and suspenders on it with respect to the environmental concerns, we can do that at a later time. Right now, we need to see the process through. And it's unfortunate because it's not just about this government. The previous government kept passing rules and like policies without regulations. And our challenge as municipalities is how we navigate this without all the information. So my recommendation to council is that we see this process through, we find out what the regulations are, and then council make a decision on how locally we implement this policy at that time.
Thank you. Okay, I'll turn it to council with any discussion points or questions. Councillor Hanna?
I'm always ready to go first, thank you, Mayor. I think at the very least, we need to generate correspondence back by the 20th to the province, and even if it's just simply to say that we don't have enough information, that we need more time, and we will consider the future, what information we receive from the province, the regulations that are going to be included. And at that time, we'll determine if we're going to do a bylaw and what restrictions will be in that bylaw, because I think we are all on record of being concerned about the environment. And for those who haven't been around on council for a while, one of the things that it even under Section 10 in Bill 66, it says we don't have to be concerned about our drinking water. And if you aren't aware of the act as a result of Walkerton, even 10 or I think it's 20 years, Perry, after you're off of council, you're still responsible civilly for any negligence that result to the drinking water. And Bill 66 says eliminates us having to concern about those things. So those are all the issues I think in the future we have to be aware of. But at the very least, I would ask that this council direct staff or ask staff to respond back to the province by the 20th, stating we need more information. Until we receive such information, we won't be implementing a open for business bylaw.
Director Spagno, do you have any comment about that?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Staff can generate a letter to that effect and reiterate the comments that were provided earlier as part of my my overview of Bill 66. That is not an issue to provide those comments if that's council's will.
Okay. Other discussion items or points, questions? I mean, it is a very surprising bill in different ways because of the number of acts that it catches and the seeming power of it. Even without the regulations, it's tough to interpret. But the majority of people in the township elected us because they felt we could do the best job. So you put your faith in us as a council. And we're up here and not about to squander that. So this is a municipal council generated initiative. It's not a developer generated initiative. It's with respect to employment lands, not residential. So it certainly won't happen with this council that this is abused in any way to the detriment of the environment. And as has been the case of the previous council, then will be the case of this council, there will be full and open disclosure and communication, public meetings where that's appropriate. So have faith. We're not going to do anything untoward with respect to this, but we're also not going to handcuff ourselves. We're very keen on economic development, and that's not just jackets and flags and pamphlets, but that's attracting business to Springwater. We're going to work hard to try to do that over the next 4 years, and there are things in play as we speak that potentially we could use Bill 66 as best we know it, and as we continue to find out about it, to help with respect to that economic development. I can't say any more right now, it's early stages, but there is more than one project that is in the works that we're pursuing. So that's what I feel. Again, before we accept this item for information, any other comments by any councillors?
I certainly see the concern. I'd like to think that everyone would have some faith in us. I mean, my water comes from a well, always has, so I'm very concerned about that myself. So I'd like to think that a reasonable, cautious person would always want to maintain water quality, because I think that's the main focus, the main concern. On the other hand, I think there's also a threshold where the bar might be this low, and you have to jump through a whole ton of hoops to maybe get something done. Whereas when the bar is this high, that's when you want to step in and say, we don't want that to happen here at all. So there is that bit of extreme. So I think what we're trying to do is basically give councils the opportunity to do what's best for their community. And certainly ruining drinking water and that type of thing is not what's in anybody's best interest, because a lot of our water, mine comes from a well, but most people's do, whether you're on the city water, the town water, or whatever. So I'd like to think that you have some confidence in us to do the best thing that we can for our community and for you folks as residents and taxpayers.
Thank you, Councillor. So the motion with respect to this, we have a mover and a seconder that the correspondence and information item number 7, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition Rebill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitive Act, be received as information. All those in favor? Further comment? Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I wasn't clear enough, but I was hoping that the council would ask staff or give direction to staff to respond that we don't have enough information, and send something back to the province that we need more information, what regulations are going to be in place before we can make a final decision on Bill 66. But I agree we have to receive this correspondence.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, to the motion I just read will be added that staff be directed to advise the province that further information is required prior to council providing further comments. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And the next item is item 8, which is the Elmvale and District Lions Club bus shelter in Elmvale. And so we have moved by George Cabral, and we need a seconder with respect to this item, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. So Councillor Cabral, can you go ahead and propose that, please?
Yes, I certainly can. Thank you, Mayor Allen. The correspondence and information item 8, Elmvale and District Lions Club, the bus shelter in Elmvale, be received as information, and that the request be referred to staff to discuss possible options with the Elmvale and District Lions Club and the County of Simcoe, and that staff report back to council with progress and potential cost implications for the township of Springwater.
May I speak to that for just a second?
Yes, definitely, Councillor.
Yeah, I think it's only fair, I don't know if the letter is available to everyone, but the Lions Club is a great service club here in Springwater Township, and it's the kind of club that often does things without ever being asked, and they're very, very active in the community. And one of the things that they've decided they'd like to take on as a project is the installation of bus shelters. Now that we have the link going back and forth to Barrie, to install and see the feasibility of installing some bus shelters so that people who are waiting for the buses aren't always exposed to inclement weather and that kind of thing. So that's what we want to move this forward a little bit and get staff to look in at it and see if they can assist with it.
And I'll just add to that, the Lions Club did approach us as council, saying that they had, through Rick Webster, saying that they had discussed internally the possibility of coming up with funds for bus shelters in Elmvale, and there might be the possibility of other Lions clubs in Ontario on the route of the present route and the future routes of the Lynx County bus service to help with bus shelters. We did have an initial meeting with the county about this, and they are very interested, and they are following up with further costs and possibilities, and subject to getting authorization from this council to proceed, there will be a further reporting with respect to this. Any further questions or discussions about this motion as presented? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we move on to item 8, which is the 2019 draft budget presentation by Director Schmidt. So Director Schmidt, if you'd come forward, please, and give us your exciting presentation about the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public, and township staff. So glad to see so many interested parties in the audience tonight here for our draft budget. That's my sarcasm for tonight. So without further ado, tonight I'll be presenting the township's draft 2019 budget. So really the purpose of tonight's presentation is just to officially table the budget to provide members of council as well as the public some key highlights of the budget. All members of council should now have their trustee budget Bibles, binders. They were available as of Friday, as well as the members of the public can view the document on the township's website, and that was available as of last Friday as well. So essentially, staff is requesting that council receive the budget tonight and refer it to our special council meetings, which are scheduled for January 16th, the 30th, February 4th, and subsequent to council's discussions, whether we have any further meetings after that. So the agenda for this evening is to essentially cover the 2019 consolidated budget. As some of you may be aware, there are 4 main components of our budget. We have the tax-supported operating budget, the water rate-supported operating budget, the wastewater rate-supported operating budget, and our 2019 capital budget and 10-year capital plan. In addition, we'll be discussing some new initiatives and or what we refer to as program changes that that have been proposed for 2019. We'll review some of the budget timelines, and lastly, review items that for council's consideration. So to look at the actual consolidated budget, as I mentioned, it is broken into 4 main components. The tax-supported operating budget essentially includes all the programs and services that are primarily funded by property taxes, reserves, and user fees. So some examples of the services and programs that fall into this budget are our road maintenance, winter maintenance, fire and emergency services, parks and recreation, bylaw enforcement, policing, along with a number of others. So on the tax-supported side, we are looking at proposed gross expenditures of $19.8 million in 2019, with gross revenues coming in at $19.7 million. Hence, our gross expenditures exceeding our gross revenues by approximately $120,000. On the water rate supported operating budget, this includes programs and services that are primarily funded from water reserve funds and or user fees. And this budget only affects those residents that are actually on municipal water services. So if you're on a well, this budget would not impact you. On the wastewater side, again, this includes programs and services that are primarily funded by the wastewater reserve funds and user fees, and again, only impacts those individuals or residents that are actually on municipal wastewater or sewer services. And on the capital side, and the 10-year capital plan, this includes capital projects in which the township acquires, constructs, or renews the service potential of its infrastructure assets. The 10-year capital plan is simply that. It is a plan for the next 10 years, of which the first year of that plan includes the capital budget. So the tax, water, and wastewater operating budgets provide the core services that residents see and or utilize on a daily basis. Therefore, in order to continue to provide the same services which residents saw in 2018, the township requires an additional $120,000 over 2018, which equates to essentially a 0.99% tax increase on the township's portion. Further to this, policing services forms part of our tax-supported operating budget, and the costs attributable to this service are passed 100% onto our residents of Springwater. So to ensure that the township's net tax levy increase doesn't increase by more than the $120,000 that was shown on the previous slide, the policing charge in 2019 is required to increase by $12 per property, except for farmland and managed forest properties, whereby there's a proposed increase of $6 over the 2018 rates. So what does this all mean? Essentially, taking into consideration the last two slides, the impact of the 2019 tax-supported operating budget on an average residential property, which is provided through the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, or MPAC, at a value of just over $451,000, is an increase of $15, just over $15, or 0.99% for the township's portion. If we look at the county right now, they're proposing an increase of 2%, which would translate into just under a $26 increase. Staff at this time assumed no increase in the education portion. We haven't received anything at this stage. As I mentioned, the policing charge for most properties would be proposed to increase by $12. So hence, we're looking at essentially a $53 or 1.39 blended increase over 2018. Again, this is for an average home assessed at just over $451,000. So if your assessment is more than that, you'll likely pay a little bit more. If it's below that, then you'll likely pay a little bit less. With regards to our residential property tax bill, I'm not sure if everybody's aware of this, but essentially the township does collect the full property taxes on behalf of the county and education. That doesn't mean that we get to keep it all. For every dollar, essentially 40 cents is given back or kept by the township. 34 cents is remitted to the county of Simcoe. 20 cents goes to the school boards, and then $6 is applied towards our policing costs. On the water and wastewater, again, this provides a little bit more of a snapshot on our water and wastewater operating budgets. Essentially, the net impact of the 2019 water operating budget is a transfer to the water reserve in the amount of just over $1 million. And this will help to assist in funding future capital and operating expenditures that are strictly water related. On the wastewater side, the net impact of the 2019 wastewater operating budget is again a transfer to the wastewater reserve fund in the amount of just over $3,000. So not a lot, but it's better than drawing on the actual reserve fund. So again, what does this equate to? So for those individuals that are on water and or wastewater services with the township, for water, essentially there is no increase in the rates. We're holding the rates, or we're proposing to hold the rates to the 2017 levels. However, on the wastewater side, we are looking at a projection of approximately $36 increase over 2018 levels, or a 4.3% on the wastewater side. Again, that's based on an average residential user who consumes approximately 220 cubic meters per year. If you're on water and wastewater, Obviously, the increase is still around $36, but the percentage increase would be 2.5% because there is no increase proposed for the water. The draft 2019 capital budget, which forms, as I mentioned, the first year of the 10-year capital plan, is comprised of gross expenditures in the amount of $16.8 million, of which $8.6 million is being carried forward from 2018, and $8.2 million represents new requests for 2019. As it can be seen by the slide here, roads and related infrastructure, wastewater, and municipal building projects take up about 70% of the 2019 capital budget. And so to ensure that we have a balanced budget, we also have sources of funding for the draft 2000 capital budget in the amount of $16.8 million. The majority of the funds are proposed to be drawn from development charges, capital reserves, debt, water and wastewater reserve funds, as well as support from our operating budget in the amount of approximately $1.2 million. The township's draft 10-year capital budget, 2019 is the first year that the township's actually completed a 10-year capital plan. We typically have done a 6-year. The proposed gross expenditures in our 10-year capital plan amount to $137.9 million. Again, the majority of the proposed expenditures are in roads and related and municipal buildings. Of this $137.9 million, $92.9 million is growth related, and $45 million is allocated towards renewal and replacement of our existing infrastructure. Again, similar, we have sources of funding that amount to $137.9 million, with a significant amount proposed to come from development charges, approximately just over $61 million. We also have debt of about $24 million, taxation of $14 million, and this is mainly due to the multi-purpose complex and fire station projects, as well as roads and related infrastructure projects that are proposed in the 10-year capital plan. I will mention at this time, although the plan is showing a large portion to come from development charges, as some members of council may be aware, we are currently in the process of negotiating with the development community in Midhurst to see if there are other funding options available to the township so that the debt that's proposed here could be minimized or reduced. In addition to providing core services and programs to Springwater residents, staff are also required to review priorities and needs each year. And should they seek a change in program direction and or require additional staffing resources, they're required to prepare a detailed justification and or program change so that council is able to review each of these essentially on their own merit. So for 2019, there are 8 program changes being proposed. This slide provides a high level of each of the program changes and what their proposed impact would be on the 2019 budget. So again, should council consider any of these program changes, these would be in addition to the net tax levy that was presented earlier. So the $120,000 that I mentioned earlier, or the 0.99%. If any of these are approved by council, then that 120 or 0.99 would be impacted. And further to that, the detailed justifications or the program changes can be found within your budget binders under the various departments that are requesting the program changes. So again, I mentioned earlier in the presentation just budget timeline. So obviously this evening we're here to table the budget, and on January 16th is our first deliberation meeting starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then on January 30th, we're looking at our second deliberation meeting, again, starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We have a third one scheduled for February 4th, again, starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then staff is hoping for adoption of the 2019 budget on February 20th, but that is subject to council's approval. So last thing I'll leave you with is that items for council's consideration is that the draft 2019 tax-based operating budget, the water operating budget, the wastewater operating budget, and the capital budget be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the 2019 policing charge increase to $240 per property for all properties, except for farmland and managed forest properties, which will be charged $120 per property. That concludes my presentation for this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Director Schmidt. So we'll start by having a mover and seconder please to accept the, to receive the draft 2019 budget. Deputy Mayor Coghlan and Councillor Cabral, thank you. And I've got to read through this, that the report from the Deputy CAO Director of Finance regarding the draft 2019 budget dated January 9, 2019 be received, and the draft 2019 tax-based operating budget as presented January 9, 2019 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the draft 2019 water operating budget as presented January 9, 2019 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the draft 2019 wastewater operating budget as presented Jan 9, 2019 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the draft 2019 capital budget as presented Jan 9, 2019 be referred to the special budget meetings of council for deliberation and consideration, and that the 2019 policing charge increase to $240 per property for all properties except for farmland and managed forest properties will be charged $120 per property, and that the 2019 tax rate bylaw be presented, including the county and education requisitions as soon as the tax ratios have been approved by the County of Simcoe, and that council adopt the compliance report for the 2019 expenses that have been excluded from the 2019 budget presented January 9, 2019, and is outlined in the subject report as a requirement of the Ontario Regulation 284/09 of the Municipal Act 2001. All right, appreciating that we're going to be over 2 or 3 days at least getting into more detail at the times indicated by Director Schmidt. And I remind everybody, these are public meetings, so you're welcome to attend. And as Director Schmidt said, the budgets are on the website. Do we have any questions or discussions at the council table at this point? Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. I just want to confirm if the budget negotiations or deliberations will be live streamed.
Director, yes. Clerk Chaparral indicates they will. Any other questions or discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Thank you, Director Schmidt. Okay, the next action, item 9.1, relates to the private retail cannabis report. May I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor? Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Coghlan. Thank you. That the report from Director of Planning Services regarding private retail of cannabis options report dated Jan 9, 2019 be received, and that Council for the Township of Springwater resolves to option 1, opt out for the purposes of provincial licensing of private retail cannabis locations within Township of Springwater, or option 2, opt in for the purposes of provincial licensing of private retail cannabis locations within the Township of Springwater. That the Province of Ontario, through the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, be so notified prior to January 22nd, 2019. Okay, I'll now turn to Director Spagnell to give us a brief update on the report that was submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So as noted, the purpose of this report is to provide two options to council for consideration. Over the past, I would say, couple of years, the province has introduced different legislation. There's been different legislation at the federal level to legalize the sale of marijuana for recreational use. Currently, in the province of Ontario, recreational cannabis can be purchased online. What is being proposed through these changes now is to allow for retail stores for recreational cannabis sales. Council has been provided the one-time only option to opt out of permitting for retail store establishments within the municipality. And as part of that opt-out process, there's a funding scheme that's been provided for municipalities who opt in versus opt out, which was indicated by the presenter at the beginning of the council meeting. So essentially, council has has to provide its decision whether or not to opt in or opt out to provide retail stores for cannabis by January 22nd, 2019. If council chooses to opt in, there are funding dollars that are available for the implementation of the legislation and the retail store outlets, along which could be devoted towards enforcement. If council chooses to opt out, there's less funding available for the implementation related to retail sales of cannabis. There have been 3 reports written on this topic starting from 2018, and as a result of we'll call it the political sensitivity, the opportunity for comments has been made available through township media avenues, those being indication of the ability to provide comment through the township newspaper, through the link, through Facebook, through email, and I think that's all. And also directly, if people want to come to the counter to discuss their options and provide their comments in writing to staff. So really, at this point in time, it's up to council to deliberate and consider the information before them to determine whether or not it's this council's wish to opt in or opt out for retail stores in the township of Springwater.
Thank you, Director Spagno. I'll open it up to council for discussion or comment. Councillor Cabral.
But prior to that, some people don't have access to the internet, and I was asked to make a petition. There's no reasoning behind it, but there are, however, a series of links to different URLs and websites, and in all good conscience, it should come here. It's a position with a number of names on it, approximately 20 some odd. Some of the folks aren't from within our municipality. But it's a request that we consider opting out. I'd like to give this to our clerk. Thank you. I'll have more comments in a minute.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor, and I support everybody that says we should opt out, because I'm not a user, I've never been a user, and I don't agree that with the federal government's policies on legalizing marijuana for recreational use. We got enough issues. However, if we opt out, we will never be able to capitalize on any of the funding that's going to be made available based on, right off the bat, if we opt in, we get, I think it's $15,000. If we opt out, we don't get all of that money. I think we only get $9,900 something. In the future, I believe that the province has written this, if once they've made $100 million, they'll give 50% of it to the municipalities who have opted in. And so that'll be shared with the other municipalities and ourselves if we were to opt in. If we opt out, we won't get the extra money for policing, for social services, as was pointed out by the gentleman tonight. And going forward, if there's any funding available, but we often reach out to the province and ask for funding grants that are there, we won't be able to get them either. So I'm suggesting that we consider strongly about opting in to get the funding. We don't want the store. I don't believe we'd ever get a store here. There's only going to be 14 stores in the entire province. The possibilities of Springwater having a store, I'd say, are nil. Our neighbors might get one. The marijuana is going to be here, whether it's they buy it online or it comes from our neighboring municipalities or cities or whatever. It'll be here. We'll have the problems, but we won't have the funding. So for that reason, I strongly ask council to consider option 1. Otherwise, we're going to be financing and paying for stuff on the back of our taxpayers because we chose to opt out.
Thank you, Councillor. Before we go to other councillors, between CAO Brindley and Director Spagno, this is just looking at opting in and opting out. any comments with respect to if we did opt in, what further considerations we would have to undertake, and bylaws, controls, just any general comments, not specific, but and the timeframe that those might arise. CEO Brindley?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if council chooses to opt in, and then the next thing would be, staff would be approaching council with respect to restrictions beyond what's detailed in the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. Because currently, the way the policy regime has been developed with respect to smoking of cannabis, it's to mirror the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So what we would then do is approach council to see if there's other requirements, because the actual legislation allows municipalities to have stricter regulations than defined by the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. I'll give you an example is Richmond Hill and Markham have passed bylaws that do not allow the smoking of cannabis or vaping of cannabis on parks, period. The Smoke-Free Ontario Act only prohibits the smoking of cigarettes right now in close proximity to playground equipment or where children are. So there's other things that council could look at in terms of whether or not they do or not. We haven't had this discussion with council. They want to have a stricter enforcement related to the actual use of cannabis, either by smoking or by vaping.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just basically comments. I'm hoping that council also supports the option to opt in. I think that it is the right decision, and I think that unless there's anything else that anybody has to say, I know I'm only seconding the motion, but can we change it to be number 2 and then have a discussion based on that? Option to opt in.
So you're putting forward option 2 to opt in. Okay. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear so that I understand better. If we chose to opt out, we have the option to opt back in at a later date if we choose to.
Director, CAO Brindley.
Mr. Mayor, yes, actually, if we opt out, we do have a choice to opt in the future, but we still do not benefit from any of the financial funding in the future. We forego that.
Apart from the financial gain, we could allow some time to see how other municipalities make out, see what problems arise, or see what hurdles other municipalities go through. I understand we wouldn't get the financial incentive. We don't know what that is right now. But anyway, I just wanted to make it clear that everybody understood. We do have the option to opt in at a later date.
Director, Councillor Cabral.
Thank you. My past life, I never thought I'd be sitting here making any kind of a recommendation one way or the other, because I arrested a ton of people for possession of marijuana and trafficking in the illegal drugs over 32 years. However, I'd be a fool not to realize how prevalent marijuana is in our society today. Prior to them legalizing it, it just was something that people did it with other people that they knew, or people did it and they kept it to themselves. The bad part is they're getting it illegally. And with an illegal product, just like people in the good old Prohibition days, often in the newspaper we'll read about somebody who's consumed some alcohol that wasn't distilled properly or bought from an LCBO store, and next thing you know, they're either dead or they are blind. And when it comes to illegal marijuana can have just about any adulterant in it that you could imagine. Nobody knows where it comes from, and the people that are dealing it don't care where they get it, because the objective for them is to make money. The downside to that is the money that they make is not money that's taxed, and we all pay for that monetarily too. Aside from the financial impacts of opting out, which are significant, I think, because they've run out of marijuana to the point where they can't open as many stores as they thought they were, and the stores are going to be opened by lottery. But some people made comments to me with respect to that the LCBO would be the better way to go. And in Elmvale, the LCBO, I think, not too far off, is within the restriction area that the Cannabis Act has stipulated. You're not allowed to have retail marijuana sales in. My concern would be that if we opt out, people are still going to get it where they're getting it now. Sure, they can buy it online. The other thing we're failing to recognize that people are more than legally capable of growing 4 marijuana plants in their own homes. So accessing it, I don't think is an issue. What the legislation, I think, is trying to do is control it, get the black market illegal people out of it, and try and control it to the point where we can, try and keep our youth away from it as best as we can. The other side of the coin is that the taxes that marijuana sales do generate obviously are going into the provincial coffers, and through that will flow down to the municipal level as well. So I kind of, as much as it's an evil when I was in my career, I would have to say that I would support the opting in of marijuana cannabis sales at the retail level.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. My opinion also is to opt in between the information we got from residents, which is basically half and half on paper, verbally, out in the streets. The stuff, the cannabis that's going to go into retail stores are going to be safe. And as Councillor Cabral said, you can get it illegally, you can get it online, but at least this stuff is safer. If we put this implementations in that Dr. Brindley said, in that smoke wherever, same as cigarettes, or even more stricter, I think that's a better place if we opt in. Plus we get the financial aspect of it, which is huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, discussion points? So what we are looking at is the resolution with option 2 to opt in for the purposes of the provincial licensing of private retail cannabis locations within the township of Springwater. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we turn to 9.2, the action report verbal update on the Environmental Resource Recovery Center. And Director Bagnall is working overtime tonight, so he's going to give us an update on that, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just recently, I guess just as recently as January 2nd, or January 3rd, 2nd, I think it was, 2019, we received the Ministry of Municipal Affairs decision regarding the Environmental Resource Recovery Center that was being proposed through the county official plan amendment process. To start off, I think it's important to note that there's 2 paths that this application is taking. There's the county official plan process, which is as a separate approval authority, versus the local official plan and zoning bylaw amendment process, which is at the discretion and approval authority of this council. So I think just to provide a little bit of history on this, the public meeting for the county official plan amendment process was held on May 9th, 2017. And the purpose of that meeting was to receive comments from the public, receive comments from any applicable agencies for county council to consider as part of any of its deliberations and discussions regarding the establishment of this use. Following the public meeting, there were a number of comments received from the public, comments received from the applicable agencies, and as part of that, there were also comments received from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and those comments were provided on May 3rd, 2018. Based on the comments that were provided by the ministry on May 3rd, and this is, remember, this is to the county, because it's a county official plan amendment, there were I would say, 4 key aspects that were itemized within those comments, which relate to air quality, archaeological considerations, environmental management and environmental enhancement, and wildland fire assessments, site hazard assessments, and the need for a fire prevention plan. Based on that, the commenting letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, there didn't appear to be any real, well, I'll call them showstoppers, with respect to the application, as what the letter had indicated was that there is a permitting process through either the ministry's process that could deal with air quality or noise or any off-site impacts, that the site plan process could be dealt with at the local level to deal with further archaeological studies. The same stands true with any environmental considerations and any assessments related to wildland fires, site hazard assessments, and a fire prevention plan. So as a result of the ministry's letter back in May 3rd, 2018, the County of Simcoe, so staff from the County of Simcoe, introduced a recommendation report for County Council to consider, and that was on June 12th, 2018. And essentially what that report did was it recommended the approval of the Environmental Resource Recovery Center, subject to a number of conditions and revisions that were included right in the official plan amendment that was being proposed by the county. That amendment specifically states that only 4.5 hectares can be devoted towards the environmental recovery resource use, that permissions do not allow for anything related to permanent disposal of waste or permanent keeping of waste on the site. And it also establishes a number of requirements that have to be met at the local level through the local process, which includes, again, the archaeological assessment of findings on the site, a fire prevention plan and emergency response plan, which has to be completed to the satisfaction of the township, an ecological enhancement plan, which was actually a modification by the ministry because they wanted the terminology of the environmental considerations changed, in order to ensure that items of public interest and provincial interest were being maintained through any subsequent applications, which would eventually trickle down to the local level. It's important to note that what that approval verifies from the ministry is that they are satisfied that all issues and all matters of public interest have been addressed for the county official plan amendment. And as part of that approval, the last date for an appeal of that amendment is on January 22nd, 2019. Now, moving into next steps, subject to what happens with the county official plan amendment, the local process has to follow that process, because the way planning works is that you've got official plan amendments, so you've got upper tier documents which provide policy and guidance for development applications, for local documents to be in conformity with or consistent with. Which takes me to the next steps through the local process. So to date, through the local process, the municipality has received applications for an official plan amendment for a local amendment now, a zoning bylaw amendment, and to date, what has happened is there's been a public meeting that was held on June 19th, 2017. All the comments provided by the public and agencies have been recorded. Staff has received comments from engineering, have received comments from the NVCA. And the next step in the process will be to host an open house to provide an update with respect to the status, subject to what happens with the ministry approval and the county's process at the county official plan level. And based on that, there will need to be a recommendation from staff to either recommend approval or refusal of the application based on all of the information that's available. As far as the zoning bylaw amendment goes, I think that one of the questions that's come up through the process is, well, how do you guarantee that all of these measures are going to be set in place and completed prior to any development happening? And what's being proposed is a zoning bylaw amendment whereby there would be what's called a hold provision set in place. And what that hold provision does is it establishes the specific requirements that are needed to be done ahead of any development moving forward before a hold can be lifted. And typically what a hold provision will do is it will say development cannot move forward until site plan approval is obtained. And so one of the requirements through that will be a hold provision, and the county would be required to go through a site plan approval process to deal with things such as an emergency response plan or a fire hazard plan. And that all has to be completed in advance of any site plan approval or development moving forward. So the reason why that's important to note is because in the ministry's decision, they are specifically referencing that those plans have to be completed, and that ties everything back. So as far as the process goes, the official plan amendment process at the county level is nearing towards the end of its stages, because now the ministry has come in with a final approval, which can now be challenged to LPAT, which was formerly known as the Ontario Municipal Board. I am available for any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Director Spagno. Okay, I'll open it up to council to, do we need to? No. Open up to council for any questions or discussion points with respect to this. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you to Director Spagno. The fire prevention plan that there's spoke of, the costs associated with not only the plan, but if it was to, if the plan indicated that there was apparatus or equipment required that Springwater would need, is that during that plan that would be negotiated with the county as to who's paying for that?
Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mary Allen, through you to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That is when the opportunity would be available through consultation with Springwater to determine what apparatus is required to deal with any fire-related issues that might potentially occur because of the use. I can't remember the firm of the name that's working with the county now. There have been discussions with emergency services about what is required. However, that's in its preliminary stage. But those discussions will need to occur over time, and there will need to be collaboration with emergency services for the township. But there is the opportunity to present those types of options for consideration through that process.
Just further to that, Director Spagno, when we do have those discussions and meetings on the specific items, and we'll use fire for example, and we make demands that we feel are necessary, if there's disagreement, is there an appeal process, or do they basically have to satisfy our demands?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Good question. Essentially, when we're getting into a site plan process, there is an appeal mechanism that can be utilized by the developer to dispute whether or not there's going to be unreasonable conditions brought forward. Typically, that's how it's dealt with. So there is the opportunity for an appeal through the LPAT process to deal with the reasonableness of such requests.
And, CAO Brindley, yes. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to that, yes, ultimately it's up to council to define what conditions are required and what modifications to the buildings are required, and as mentioned, what apparatus is required. At the end of the day, this is a case where actually the county would have to appeal us to the LPAT. And as you know, that's an expensive process too. So they have to weigh, is it worth just satisfying us as averse to going through a prolonged period? So I think this actually, in the case of on-site mitigation, puts our council in the driver's seat.
Well, that's good, thank you, because I don't think, given what we've been told, that it makes sense for us as a council, if council so wished, to appeal this at this point, given what the government has said. But our next significant opportunity is to deal with these conditions and make them such that we make the best of this situation. The public meeting that you referred to, when might that be? Would the consultants be involved? We've received a lot of questions from residents over the last 2 years with respect to this. How do we ensure that those all get dealt with properly by the right parties, which would be ourselves, the county, and the consultants?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I guess to answer your question, we could have an open house and have county representatives come in and provide information to answer those questions that have been posed through the public process. That could happen in early spring before June. After that, staff would take back all the information that's been made available and provide, you know, as I stated, a recommendation report later on, most likely in the fall. On that basis, that would give time for staff to take all the information away and work on those conditions that we're speaking of right now, to have the deliberation with the county to try to iron things out and deal with certain requests that this council may have, and that which may come out of the public open house and the further consultation that happens through that. So we're looking at a time frame of in between now to before June and the summer break, and then probably reconvening back to the item through a staff report in the fall. One note I would like to make as well, I spoke to the site plan approval process, but the hold provision is actually established through a zoning process, and it's through that where we can specifically require certain conditions that have to be met before that hold is lifted and development can move forward. So there is an appeal mechanism through the zoning process and the local OP as well.
Okay, and the county can't be challenging us with respect to the speed at which we move along this process, can they?
Mayor Allen, another good question. The county does have the ability under the Planning Act and through the appeal mechanisms to appeal the lack of decision by the municipality. That time period is up. So what we'd be doing is trying to work collaboratively with the county to avoid any of those costs and to avoid any contested hearings or anything of that nature. But that opportunity is there for them under the regular rules of the Planning Act and the appeal process.
And if they do that, then how does that affect the timeline and the process that you earlier described?
Mayor Allen, thank you for the question. It definitely prolongs the process, and it definitely it's a delay. It's a time-consuming process, and it's a costly process.
Primarily to the county in the way of a costly process?
I would say to both parties usually, but it's to both parties.
And during this, if any residents have further questions leading up to this public meeting, they're free to, as they have been, to express those to us, preferably in writing, because we will take all of the ones that we have had over the last couple of years, plus any further ones, and certainly include that in our consideration and preparation for the public meeting, correct?
That is correct, Mayor Allen, yes.
Any other, Councillor Hanna?
Thank you. Just one quick question. Could the proponent use any of the exceptions, if you like, coming forward in Bill 66 in order to stop Springwater Township from trying to collect bonds, other exceptions that are being provided for under, especially under, I think it's Section 10 in Bill 66. Could that be used against us is my question.
Director Spagno?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Councillor Hanna. Right now, no, that can't happen for two reasons. The first one is Bill 66 isn't in place, so there's no authority for us to use that or for this council to use that in order to expedite anything. And then secondly, it's really council's discretion if Bill 66 was to be approved to determine whether or not it wants to utilize that option and initiate anything, expedite things. The other thing that would have to be proven is that the number of jobs, and until the regulations are provided, we don't know if, for example, 50 jobs have been identified as an example of the number of jobs that need to be created in order for populations of under 2,000 or 250,000 people. We don't know if that regulation is going to change. So at this point, whether or not it meets any of the parameters to be able to utilize Bill 66, we don't know at this point.
Thank you. CAO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To add to that, the open for business zoning is a zoning, which is not controlled by the county. It's only in our control. So my read of this is that, no, they cannot use that because the open for business zoning owner only pertains to the local municipality and we have control.
Thank you. Any other points of discussion at the table here? All right, thank you, Director Spagnell, and that was informative. Moving forward to 10.1 consent agenda items, we need a mover and a seconder for the action reports 10.2 and 10.4. Deputy Mayor Coghlan. We did 10.3. Deputy Mayor Coghlan and Councillor Moore. Yes, I'll turn to Clerk Chaperon to explain what we're doing with respect to these.
So just as a reminder, there has been a change to the agenda format. Action reports are now under a consent resolution or consent motion. So where you see items 10.2, 10.3, which has already been dealt with, and 10.4, the motions that are underneath those reports, should this consent motion go forward, would be adopted all as under one motion. So if a member of council would like to have an alternate resolution than what is proposed, or would like to vote against that specific item, then they would ask to pull the item from the consent motion and it would be dealt with separately. If it's just a question for clarification, then it doesn't need to be pulled per se, only if you would like a change in direction or if you would like to vote against that item. So for this motion right now, 10.3 is removed out of it because it has been dealt with prior to. So items 10.2 and 10.4 would be dealt with in consent unless somebody would like to pull that item.
Okay, that being said, do any councillors? Yes, Councillor Cabral.
Or just a question, the City of Barrie non-resident fee agreement, that's one of the ones we're talking about. I'm just curious.
Correct.
I'm just curious if anybody knows how many Springwater residents actually avail themselves of that particular option?
Thank you, CAO Brindley, or, sorry, Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Councillor Corbell. I just got the results from the 2018 registrations and non-resident, what would have been non-resident payments required. There was just under 2,400 programs that were registered for.
Thank you very much, appreciate that.
Actually, let's get this on the floor first, okay? It sounds like we need to pull 10.2. Anybody want to pull 10.4? Okay, so then we're dealing with 10.4, that the 10.4 be received and that the recommendations contained therein be approved as presented. All right. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, 10.2. Deputy Mayor Coghlan?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and through you to Director Belcourt. 2,400 programs were available, or 2,400 residents registered in that, in the 1 year period or in the 4 year term with them? I just would like clarification on that, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through to Council or Deputy Mayor Coghlan. It was 2,389 participants in various programs over 2018 only.
So if our last year was 77,800 and 2,389 took advantage of it, that's an average per of $32.50 per resident user. Okay, that's useful information, thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you. And is that primarily with the East Bayfield Center, or is that across there? Because I know that in 2002 when it started, it was, the concern I have is that it was $50,000 when it started, and now we're up into the 80s, and this is the first time we've ever had numbers to really, to do it. But do we know if it was in aquatics programs or the 3%, and also secondly, the 3% increase that the city of Barrie, that we've been paying since 2002, has there been any consideration that we in Springwater now have, like, they're using our soccer fields, we offer more, but they are still offering our residents the same, so I'm just curious if the agreement's been looked at in that way at all.
Thank
Director
you, sir.
Belcourt.
To Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Yes, that has been factored into the agreement dating back to 2002 when it was first initiated. The program registrations are primarily in the swim lessons, summer camps, sport and fitness, dance programs, the seniors programs at the senior centers, facility rentals, rec pass memberships, and that also includes the residents that participate in like minor hockey programs, skating programs, any of their summer sport leagues. So any time that they register or a person participates in the city of Barrie, if they're a non-resident, they would be required to pay a non-resident fee up to a maximum, I think it's $55 now a year, based on the length of the programs that they're in. So many of these people would pay upwards to $40 to $55 a year if this agreement wasn't in place. The fact that it increases a bit each year is, the initial thought process was covering the cost of the residents that were forced to play minor hockey in Barrie due to different governing hockey associations rules. For example, a child in Midhurst could not play rep hockey in Elmville based on the OMHA boundary guidelines. So they were forced to play in Barrie and then forced to pay the non-resident fee. So that was the whole catalyst behind the agreement, and then it expanded to look at all facilities and all programs. So it's not just the East Bayfield Center. So if you're at Holly or the Allendale Rec Center or any of the City of Barrie rec facilities, you're treated the same as a City of Barrie resident with the same rights and privileges and at the same rates.
Follow on?
And a follow-on to that, and understanding that as residents from Springwater are forced to play hockey, excuse me, in Barrie, we have residents of, I believe, Tiny and Tay who are forced to play, and even Oro-Medonte that are playing in Elmvale. So the $7,500 that we charge to Tiny, do we also charge a rate to any other municipalities who are forced? And does our rate also increase by 3%? Because I think it's been the same for the last 4.
Thank you, through to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. The agreement with Tiny was structured back in 1994. It was actually previous to 94, but in 94 they made a substantial capital contribution towards the renovation of the Elmville Arena. And at that time, the annual fee was renegotiated, and you're right, it has not increased over the years substantially. There's been one increase, I think, since 94. It went from 5,000 to 7,500 a couple years ago. The number of residents from Tiny utilizing Elmville, especially minor hockey, has declined over the past number of years. So the rate, I think, is still reflective of the use. With regards to Oro-Medonte, we have an understanding because we have a few people from Oro-Medonte that use Elmville, but also there's a number of residents in the southeastern corner of the municipality that play in Oro-Medonte, so it's like a wash. Similarly with ESSA, we have a number of residents in the southwest corner that will play in ESSA.
Okay, we have to pause and rewind a little bit. We need a mover and a seconder to discuss this, so. Can I please have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Chapman and Councillor Moore. All right, continuing. So do we know the increase? It was 2,389 in 2018. Do we have any idea of the percentage increase on average per year? Because basically we're subsidizing $35 of what they would otherwise have to pay, $50, $60? Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. We don't have previous stats. The software system the city previously had did not break down residents by postal code like it does now. So we were averaging based on what information we could grab from the user groups and what information they could grab at the time of registrations.
Okay, Councillor Cabral?
I'm just wondering, on our website, how do we promote this particular benefit to the Springwater residents? Or has it been kind of like if you knew about it?
Director Belcourt, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councilor Cabral. In the recreation guide, which is also online, it's prominently posted inside the front cover that all Springwater residents are able to register in City of Barrie programs. And if they require information, to contact myself. And every opportunity that we get at a public function, we let people, residents know that that opportunity exists for them. I mean, we've received nothing but positive comments back from our residents over the years for this agreement. Primarily, seniors, being able to access the seniors programs in Barrie. The swimming programs that people are now able to be at the front of the line, not at the back of the line to get into. And I'm sure CAO Brindley can attest to that the cost to operate a pool is far less than $80,000 a year.
Yeah, just one more point. I would like to see people be made maybe more aware of it. I'm ignorant of it myself until I read it, and it was nice to see that Springwater Township gets the benefit of going and applying for these programs before they're open to any of the other municipalities too, which I think is a pretty big bonus, so thank you.
We also put it on the website and Facebook page, I believe. And is it ever included in the tax notices that go out? I know we're doing more of that online now, but is it ever included there? Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to members of council. Not that I'm aware of, not since 2013. Beyond that, I'm not sure, or before that, I'm not sure.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor French, and through you to CEO Brindley. Oh, jeez, twice.
$30.
You call that
Again.
Oh, go stand in the corner. I can't.
I'm so sorry. Train of thought. There was an article today at simco.ca highlighting, the Barrie Advance, that's online, highlighting the relationship with that. But I agree with Councillor Cabral. It would be awesome even if we just like a little blitz when the next rec guide goes out, just to say, hey, just so you know, the boundaries are there. If we do move into Barrie, I think that to get more use of it would be great.
Just, Mr. Mayor, tomorrow I'll be happy to review this with our Director of Communications, and we'll pump that message out.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further discussions, then all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I didn't read it. Okay, next we turn to verbal updates, and we start with the official plan update. Director Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So I would hope that by now council has received the digital versions of the official plan, the discussion paper for the official plan review and the growth management strategy document, which again, I'll note that it is online. I'd just like to say that staff's door is always open, and if you have any questions about those documents and the information within, please drop by or give us a call just to discuss those. We're looking to start moving forward on finalizing the last portion of phase 1 of the project so that we can start moving on to phase 2 of the project, which will be the background studies needed to supplement any draft policy that has to be done as part of the new official plan. And that's all I have to report on the official plan review process and growth management strategy.
Thank you. Those are significant reports that take a bit of fortitude to get through. Will we be having a primer for council that would hopefully be addressed by yourself and others to walk us through or help us with understanding the issues?
Mayor Allen, staff can provide such a primer if that's council's wish. Be more than happy to do so, yes.
CAO Brindley?
Mayor Allen, what I propose is not necessarily a formal special meeting of council, but definitely a education session as a special meeting. This way, you're not necessarily getting all the staff here. We'll focus just on a planning session. We can do that.
Excellent idea. So maybe if we did that after the budget, obviously, at a time frame that makes sense vis-a-vis moving forward, but maybe as soon after the budget as possible, that would be great. Moving into economic development update, please, Director Spagnell.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'd like to report that we are chugging away on the website to have the website completed. We're currently working on the content for all the web pages that are going to be on the new website. The aim is to make these readable and understandable so that the user, being the resident, can understand what we're doing and what everybody does from a department standpoint, from council standpoint. We are ahead of schedule, and we're hoping to launch in March.
And what will be the rollout to the public to make sure that as many of those are informed and can take advantage of the new and improved?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. That's a good question. That's something that we'll talk to communications about to try to roll out some announcements of the new website and whatnot and make sure that it is known that it is new and improved.
Thank you. County updates, Deputy Mayor Coghlan, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. The county update, right now we are working through the budget process, and at this point now there is the governance committee and the striking committee are working to put together the county committees, I guess. Also to be noted, during our last meeting, Mayor Allen put a motion on the floor. The budget process that the county was using budgeted to budgeted rather than actual to budgeted, so it was difficult to really get a grasp as a new councillor what happened this year. So it was supported by county council to have the next budget process use actual figures, so I think that was a benefit. But other than that, it's the next one's the 15th. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Good. Thank you. And we'll move on to municipal updates. Are there any councillors with municipal updates? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
February 8th and 9th. So we are looking for anyone who wants to come into our parade. You can let us know by our Facebook page if you need. Lots of things going on. It's always a great event, and this is our 49th year.
Thank you. Pardon me?
Theme is Winter in the Wild West.
Oh, good, good. Any other municipal updates? Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor Allen, I just wanted to mention, the other night I missed it, it was on the news because I fell asleep, but the kids are in the new gym, the new addition, and they're just so excited that they're in there using this new facility. And of course, we had the opportunity, myself and Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor, and yourself, to go through and take a look at it. And They said then, when we went through it, that it would be in the new year that the kids are in there. They are in there now, and I think they're looking towards something in the springtime for an open house, maybe close to when the Maple Syrup Festival, but again, it's still in the early stages, but an open house for the public to come through and take a look at it. So a lot of excitement up in Elmvale over this new addition and coming forward. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Yes, thank you. Also wanted to mention in time for the next rec guide that the date for the Springwater Swing will be June 12th at Orr Lake.
Excellent, thank you. And I just want to remind people, the MVCA Council Orientation Session, the MVCA 101, is on January the 21st from 9 a.m. till noon at the Midhurst Community Center. If any councillors have an interest to learn about the MVCA, we will be talking about it a lot over the next 4 years. So again, that's January 21st, 9 till noon at the Midhurst Community Center. Any other municipal updates? Okay, so we move to notices of motion, and I believe Deputy Mayor Coughlin has a notice of motion. Turn it over to you.
You did a call for a seconder?
Okay, but before that, we will ask for a seconder for Deputy Mayor Coughlin's motion. Seconder is Councillor Chapman. Apparently I have to read it as well, even though it's Deputy Mayor Coughlin's motion. So it is that the following committees of council be hereby dissolved, and that being the Master Fire Plan Committee, the Building Committee, Fire Station 2, the Fleet Advisory Committee, and the Trails Advisory Committee. So now I'll turn it to Deputy Mayor Coughlin to speak about this.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and just for information for council and those that are here. Comprising the committees this year was, the response that we had from the public was just incredible. And we understand that we have a lot of committees. We're all, I feel, staff and council, we have, I don't even know, I should actually write that down, how many committees. But there are some committees that aren't required, in my opinion. I think the Fire Master Plan is committed, the committee, it's completed to the part that it can. The Building Committee for Fire Station number 2, we can bring that back up when we start to do that. I did speak to Councillor Ritchie about the Fleet Advisory Committee and also about having the Trails Advisory Committee be part of RAC. I do think that these committees no longer serve a purpose, or that their purpose can be utilized within another committee. So understanding how many committees we have, I do feel that these can be dissolved.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And so, any discussions or questions with respect to this motion? Seeing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried? Just on this topic, Clerk Chaperone, maybe you could just give us an overview of what's the next steps with respect to the committee membership, please.
Okay, thank you. The next meeting on January 23rd, council will, in closed session, receive a report from the mayor with recommendations on public or citizen appointments to our committees, to council's committees. And once that is established, the terms of reference along with the composition, the membership, will be approved at, or will be proposed for approval at that same meeting. Council will also have their appointments confirmed by resolution. And once that is completed, then the process to actually start these committees will take place.
Thank you. Next, we turn to items for future consideration. And recall last meeting, we stated that the items for future consideration will be reviewed in our next meeting on January 23rd to deal with the future of any of the outstanding ones, which remains on the list, which doesn't remain on the list. So given that, are there any items for future consideration any councillor wants to introduce this evening? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to bylaws. May I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Ritchie, thank you. That the bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk, being 219-002, appointing an alternate county council, and 219-003, the 219 interim tax levy. Any questions or discussions with respect to these? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we turn to the confirmatory bylaw. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Chapman, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That the bylaw 219-004 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of the council at the regular meeting held on January 9, 2019, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And finally, the adjournment. Mover and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Councillor Ritchie, thank you. The regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 8:50 p.m. to meet again in a regular meeting on January 23rd in the Council Chambers Administration Center, Minising. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for a good meeting, and thank you for attending and tuning in. Good night.